I thank the Minister for answering the urgent question. And we now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the training of teachers in relation to the early identification of autism and for connected purposes. For those with autism, the stats are stark. Less than half of autistic children say they are happy in school. 73% of young autistic people say their teachers do not understand their needs. Only 20% achieve grade 5 or above in English and maths GCSEs compared to the 52% of all pupils. And on top of this, autistic children are twice as likely to be excluded from school in comparison to their peers. And it doesn't get better in adulthood. Just 29% of autistic people are in full or part-time employment. Those in work are paid a third less than their peers. This is not right. No. Especially when, with proper support, the potential that autistic children have should not be underestimated. Autistic people have stronger attention to detail, creative talents, mathematical and technical abilities. They often have expertise in niche areas. And for those of us who know autistic children, they are honest and they are loyal. We all know an early diagnosis helps to identify what that individual child needs and what adjustments need to be put in place so that their strengths can be maximised. It provides a positive pathway instead of a negative one. It means those with autism are more likely to find work. It helps combat mental health issues, which affect 54% to those with SEND and costs the UK economy £582 million. 92% of children are waiting longer than the NHS 13-week deadline, with 46% more than 18 months. A backlog that means a quarter of children with autism will not be diagnosed whilst at school. Now, in Norfolk specifically, between 2021 and October 23, 1,141 under-18s were diagnosed with autism, with many waiting more than 18 months for their diagnosis. Some even wait 3 years, and one 10 years. So how many more, the 187,000 children in Norfolk, won't be assessed at all? The question is, why doesn't a diagnosis happen until much later? Well, unfortunately, there is an often wait-and-see attitude. But a delay in diagnosis is extremely damaging for a child who is autistic, and it's not necessary. Conditions like autism have markers from 6 months old, as it becomes obvious through the way they learn, move, or pay attention. Existing weaknesses in the SEND system, magnified by the pandemic, also make it difficult for people with autism to get a diagnosis. There are inconsistencies in how SEND is identified, a lack of joined-up thinking surrounding care, and a lack of clarity regarding accountability and responsibility in organisations. This leads to delays with an already weak system, making the fight many parents undertake to have their child assessed even harder. Over a year ago, I mentioned in this chamber Hayley Turner, a constituent of mine, who came to me when she was having difficulty getting the right support for her son, Rocky. I spoke then on early years psychologists in education OPQs, but it was in part through conversations with Hayley that the inspiration for this bill today took flight. And I'd briefly like to share her story. Rocky was just 2 years old when his parents noticed that he was developing a little differently. But it was when he started school at 4 that it became clear mainstream education was not the right fit, and that those teaching him were not trained for dealing or teaching children with neurodiverse conditions. The situation was distressing for him and Hayley, but Hayley had to fight to be heard. She went to tribunal and spent many hours putting together all the necessary paperwork to show that Rocky needed to be placed in specialist education. It was clearly an unnecessary distraction that took Hayley away from being the mum she needed to be for both her children, making everyday family life harder. And Rocky was just one in thousands of children whose parents are fighting today for their children to have an adequate education. Indeed, the government's own SEND statistics show that 98% of parents will win on appeal once they get to a tribunal. Now, these children are not difficult, they're not troublesome, and in fact it was Haley that said something very poignant, that autistic children, whilst in mainstream schools, are easily misunderstood. They're just innocent children trying to survive in an environment that isn't designed for them. They have to fail first before they are adequately supported. And that's not how a child should start their education. Now, Rocky's story is eventually a success, but it is this, along with other conversations I've had, that has led me here today to introduce this bill. And I think it's important that we impress on all members of the House today that autistic children will not grow out of it. Autistic children will need extra help and targeted treatment to reduce the chance of the negative consequences and financial burden in later life. However, as it stands, 39% of primary school teachers have just more than half a day's training in autism. Such a small amount. For secondary school, this drops to just 14%. SEND is seen as a specialist area, a bolt-on, not a built-in, with teacher training not including how to ensure teachers can identify SEND markers. This needs to change. Autistic pupils routinely identify autism training for teachers as the single biggest change that would improve their experience of school. This can only happen if all teachers are trained in SEND, and it is for these reasons that I introduce my 10-minute rule bill, the Autism Early Identification Bill, which will deliver support to increase autism assessment, reduce diagnosis waiting times, and introduce mandatory autism training for all teachers. This bill will provide a solid base through which all teachers will learn about early identification, the Special Educational Needs Code of Practice, the pattern and sequence of child development, what needs to be done if a child has communication difficulties, and understanding and dealing with difficult behaviour. It would mean that if milestones are not met, then help can be put in place. Fewer children would struggle in school, and it would mean that they would be no longer labelled difficult or disruptive. By introducing a bill that ensures all teaching staff can support autistic pupils well, schools in turn will become more inclusive, where everyone, staff, pupils and parents, are truly valued and feel a sense of belonging. Now, I am encouraged by the openness of this government with changes in the system. It is positive that the government announced as far back as the last Queen's speech that every child will get the education they deserve, and that there is vision, ethos and strategic direction in our education system. And I'm encouraged by the publication of the SEND and Alternative Provision Improvement Plan, in which the government stated they will explore opportunities to build teacher expertise through a review of the initial teacher training, core content framework and early career framework. Yesterday I was encouraged by the Secretary of State's comments at the dispatch box and the letter from the Minister last July when it was said that all initial teacher training courses must be designed so that trainee teachers can demonstrate a clear understanding of the needs of all pupils, including those with SEND, and that all teachers are teachers of SEND. All of this would be encapsulated in the bill, but it would go further. Having a SENCO in school is not enough. Only having a few providers providing the training is not enough. This bill would ensure all autistic children receive the support they need so they can flourish. It will make sure autistic and SEND pupils are not a forgotten piece of the puzzle, but an integral part of the education system. It will help the government achieve their objectives in the area. This is a bill that is supported by the sector, who are keen to help with the government on the finer detail regarding what training is needed, how it should be rolled out, as well as working on technologies to make the system around ECHPs a whole lot easier and ensure that support can be easily reviewed to ensure that it continues to suit the young person's needs. So I say, as I begin to wrap up, to the Minister, please be bold with this. Please really support us. Use the essence of my bill to make sure that the reforms really do make autistic children's lives better. And I'd like to thank Full Spectrum, Keystone Consulting, Ambitious About Autism, as well as my constituent Hayley Turner, and everyone else who has supported me so much in this bill.
Questions that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill? As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Sir Robert Buckland, Dame Caroline Dinage, Dr. Sir Liam Fox, Robin Walker, Edward Timpson, Jim Shannon, Marion Fellows, Peter Gibson, James Sunderland, Elliot Coburn, Steve Tuckwell, and myself.
Duncan Baker.
Autism Early Identification Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 19th of April.
Friday the 19th of April. Thank you. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.